Welcome, everyone. This is Illiterate. My name is Evan.
My name is Taylor. I read a book this week.
I watched a show. This week we are covering The Queen's Gambit on Netflix. We're surprised. We are so surprised that we are covering this right now, and it is still number one.
Yeah.
The Queen's Gambit. If you don't know anything about it, it's about an orphan at 9. She discovers the game of chess in an orphanage and becomes a huge child star
in the 60s.
But also forms a bit of an addiction along with that stardom.
And the big question that everybody had with it is, where did this come from? Who was this, a memoir, or what is the whole thing with this? But it's all fake.
There's
it's a fiction.
A lot of aura around is how real is this? Was she real? Is this character actually a real person? Beth Harmon. People seem to be really taken with this character, and so we're going to try to give you some context here of what is this thing? Where did it come from? What about it is true? What about it is made up? And why is it so big now? It is huge. It is absolutely wild.
So we'll start with the film. The creative team, Scott Frank, wrote and directed all of it, which is crazy for a TV show miniseries format, that the same person would be directing and writing every single episode.
Typically, you have a showrunner who has a writer's room, and a writer or two writers will tackle each script at a time, and they interconnect and they all talk to each other, but you have different people kind of handing off the writer's job and the directing job for episode to episode. So to have a main helmer who is really beginning to end, that is really rare. And I think that is one of the aspects that is really paying out in spades here, because it's being regarded as one of the most well-crafted series that Netflix or any streaming service has put forth yet, because it is incredibly cohesive in the way that it's told. I would attribute that because it has, one creative force really driving it.
The focal point of the whole thing is chess. And so the chess sequences have to be true to life, or at least resembling something close to that, or it's going to get so much scrutiny.
So much of the game here. I mean, it's how do you make chess exciting? How do you take something so internal? I mean, honestly, if you're just watching it and you're not the one playing, how do you take something so banal almost and make it cutting edge, really tracking what's going on?
Because I don't play
like an action movie.
I don't play chess, but the people that do, it's like it is so exciting, but it's all in your mind,
right? And it's hard to unless you were like if you're the person doing it, it's incredible, but it's hard to be a part and watch it, like be an audience member for it.
So there was a guy, Bruce Pandolfini, who also interestingly consulted on the novel, which came out in '83. We'll get to that at the end. But he was used as the consultant for the entire series. He was the guy who was, and he is world renowned as like the master chess teacher. He's probably seen the most chess matches of any living human being. He coached a lot of the great now grandmasters. It's this whole thing. But he consulted on the novel and is credited with giving the title of the thing, The Queen's Gambit. Wow. Walter Tevis, who is the author.
Yeah.
He got it from this guy. The whole idea of the opening move, which you sacrifice a piece in order to get a positive position. That's what essentially the Queen's Gambit is. Don't slay me if you know chess, actually, and it's more complicated than that. But
I'm not a big chess man myself.
Yeah. Thematically, that's what it encompasses as well. So it's a great title. And then just the rest of the creative team. William Horberg was an executive producer who has been tracking with this project for a while. He was one of the producers for Searching for Bobby Fischer, which is a notable chess movie, which isn't about Bobby Fischer, but it follows Josh Waitzkin, who is the new prodigy, who would be kind of like the next Bobby Fischer. And that's how this executive producer, that's how he met Bruce Pandolfini, who then works on this, because he was working with him on in that documentary. He met him there. And then Bruce knows Garry Kasparov, the Russian grandmaster, who is very much closely related in his own life, because he was a former child prodigy, a 10-year-old genius who was taken out of regular life. He also knows about the USSR because that's when he was playing. He had gone to tournaments, all that stuff. So he was also involved in the consultation of how the chess was presented, these games in this series.
Fantastic.
So it's got all the heavy hitters from even that time period.
Yeah.
And then Anya Taylor-Joy is the main actress. And I thought just a little tidbit of trivia. So Scott Frank, who wrote and directed it all, he sent her the book because there wasn't a script yet. So she read the book first.
Oh, interesting.
And she said she devoured it and loved it. And then, but it was already on when he got involved in it. but I thought that was very rare that you would get an
Read
actor
the book first,
involved
yeah.
when you don't even have the script material, but it's like, this is what we're gonna be basing it off of.
Well, it's telling me that there's a clear vision.
Mhm.
I could see that being a big advantage if you know if you were really thriving on what's going on there in the
Mhm.
thematics.
Yeah.
Um,
The production process, though, even though it sounds like, wow, they got everybody together, what a dream team, was a huge. I mean, it took almost 40 years to get it made. The book came out in 83. There was interest in it then. There were scripts going left and right. And the big one was around 2008. Heath Ledger, it was going to be
mm,
his directorial debut. He
oh man,
resonated with the
yeah,
material
yeah,
because, as we know, he's battling addiction. He was also super interested in chess, was a whiz
yeah.
himself at it. It had begun production. Ellen Page was going to be the
Oh
main
man, that
character,
would have been
and then
fantastic.
right before he passed away. So it was not until 2019, basically, that Netflix saved it from this development hell and got Scott Frank on it, and then the whole piece got. I don't have all the story behind how it got
So
together,
yeah,
but
and I mean the author though, so he's been trying to make it since he's put out the book, right? For this entire time.
yeah. So he, and we'll get to him at the very end, but he passed away a year after the book came out.
Oh gosh.
So he was not involved in any of this stuff. It was all
Oh
his
man.
estate. But yeah, we'll see later on his
Okay.
relationship
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
movies and how it all fits together. But since he had passed, I think that was also maybe perhaps some of the complication of getting it done. Like
Gotcha.
we said, the big thing that gives it its credibility in the book and the movie is exciting chess sequences, which
Right.
maybe seems like a, a misnomer in itself.
Really exhilarating chess sequence.
Yeah, yeah. But
But it's true. It's absolutely true. There's a sequence in the second episode where it's a completely visual sequence. There's no
mhm,
dialogue to carry you through it, and it's completely focused on her. What is she paying attention to? Where's her focus during the game? And it's all done incredibly precise. Where is the camera sit? How low is it sitting? Is it looking down on her? Is it
mhm,
looking up on her opposer?
yeah,
It's every choice in that sequence is incredibly tuned in.
yeah,
That this sequence could be used as taught in classes for visual storytelling,
yeah.
as how to direct exactly what's going on with no words whatsoever.
Mhm.
This is the work of a director and a cinematographer really sitting down and how do we present something so quiet, so
Mhm.
simple, so banal, really exciting? How do in just a moment do they put in your mind exactly what they want you to think?
And I'll also
It's fantastic.
shout out the editor, Michelle Tesoro. So she was also consulted early on in the whole process of how are we
Yeah,
gonna
not to
piece
downplay
this.
the editor. This is all takes all 3 of those pieces.
Yeah,
But absolutely. This whole sequence takes all every element here, and
yeah.
it's working at
So, and
10.
each of the sequences, I haven't seen it all, but as the show progresses, each chess match focuses on a different thing. So Scott had said to her, "Here's a bunch of the films I don't want it to be like," which is basically every other thing that has shown a chess match. There's kind
Yeah.
of already a visual language for it, but the visual focus of the matches change. So sometimes, like you said with this one, it's about the competitors' faces.
Yes.
Later on in another match, it's about the clock and
Mm.
sound, and everything is used to represent timing. The another one, it's about the piece movement and how the pieces move around the board as
Oh,
opposed to the other.
very,
So
very
each one
interesting.
takes on a different visual
A
and
di and
auditory
focusing
focus.
on a big element of what it takes to actually
Mhm.
play the game, because you can't
Yeah,
do it all in one sequence, and you're not saying anything if you're saying everything all at once. But if you
yeah,
can take each game and make that into a concerted point of, you can almost learn if you're
yeah.
if you're taking it piece by piece, if you're paying attention to what these sequences really are contrived around, you can learn really
A piece
intimate
about the
elements,
game. Yeah.
exactly aspects of the
Yeah.
game.
Yeah, so I just loved one of the sequences involves all these split screen movements, and the editor, Michelle, she was saying she had taken this idea from, and it's something we'd covered a long time ago, but there was a 1971 film called Le Mans, which was the Steve when we talked about Ford
Yes,
versus
yes,
Ferrari,
Ford, Ferrari.
and this was the Steve McQueen one where he actually raced in it, and the
Yeah.
picture car beat out normal cars in the race. So there's sequences in that are all split screen and everything. And she
Right.
said that's what she was inspired by. But then she said she watched Jojo Rabbit and she was like, God damn it, they used the
Yes.
same thing.
Yes, they did.
Yeah. So
Yes, they
but
did.
she had that idea before that movie came out. So she was
No,
like,
no,
but yeah.
it's
So
validating. I'm like, no, that would be. I love that. That would be validating for me. I'm like, yes, they did it.
yeah.
Somebody else is thinking about this. This is good. This is good.
But not to belabor the point, we just know Bruce Pandolfini, he had come in there and given them all of the opening positions. He had come up with over 350
Oh my
different
god.
chess games because of all the stuff going on in the background. Gary Kasparov also contributed just how they move the pieces. He's like, you can tell somebody who plays chess just from how they're grabbing the pieces. Like if you're playing baseball and you grab the baseball bat at the wrong angle or at the wrong place,
Right,
setting up for a
right.
spring. He's
Oh
like,
my
so
gosh.
he teaches them how you move, when you hesitate, how you write things down, how you hit the clock. Like these are all things that are embedded in the culture of chess
Ooh,
that you
yeah,
need
man. I
people
bet
to
that
tell you whether or not this is because I wouldn't know.
that's
I just think you
invaluable. I
grab a
mean, that's
piece and click it. Yeah.
absolutely invaluable. I mean, if I was an actor, just in the room as in background, I would just be like, "Whoa," just a sponge. Like, please, like anything, like
Yeah.
what? And that's what I've come as I'm getting older. I'm just you realize that people dedicate their whole lives to relatively a narrow thing,
Yeah.
and they can
Minutia.
dedicate their entire life to it and spend every day doing it. There's so much knowledge in every little thing. So if you
Mhm.
start to look at chess, like typical Americans would look at football or baseball. There's a whole world there that just floats by your eyes
Well, and
if
also
you're
a
not privy.
world from before the 1500s. Like it's been around for so long, and the games have been recorded. So it's like
Yeah.
imagine watching a sports game, but it's like, oh, you can see exactly what they did. Yeah. So some of the other stuff in terms of the depth of this, there are real life corollaries, even though it's a fiction book and it's not based on anything. They pulled elements from the history and culture of
Mm,
chess and embedded it into the
okay.
show. So the final match is based on a real international tournament that took place in Switzerland in 93. It was very
Okay.
famous. The game was a draw in the actual series. It's not a
Yeah.
draw. Somebody wins or
Yes.
loses. But they changed it so that she finds a different move and whatever happens happens. But it's based on everything up until that point is literally how they played that famous 1993
That's
championship
fascinating.
game. And then
See, and I'm so inept when it comes to chess. Like I didn't even understand the idea of when you're referring to a game as
right.
in something a past tense game, and you can replay that game and
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
redo the
yeah.
moves and know exactly. Like I had no concept of any of that at all
Mhm.
before now.
Yeah, that's how
And the
you get
fact
good.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my god, they're using actual games and recreating games all throughout the entire the entire
Yeah,
series
historic
is like
games,
that's
like
a whole
yeah.
world that was opened up to me. I was like, I would have never even thought about that.
Yeah, and so, there's a couple, like you said, they copy games and movements and everything, but there's a particular thing that her opponent does, the way that he reacts at the end is exactly how the reaction happened against Spassky versus
Mm,
Bobby Fischer at the
really?
1972 championship in Iceland, and that was a huge event, and there's actually a whole movie dedicated to it. It's a 2015 film called Pawn Sacrifice. Tobey Maguire plays Bobby Fischer.
Oh, interesting.
But the way that that happened at the end and what the people actually did, like character wise, is what happens at the end
Okay.
of this. And it's great because Pandolfini, like we said, he's the master of this. He was a commentator at that championship game.
Oh
Like I said,
wow.
he's seen more things,
Oh my
but he knew
gosh.
exactly everything what's going on. And then just in terms of Bobby Fischer, the main character, Beth, probably mostly resembles him in terms of if you could tie her personality and character quirks as a chess player to an actual person,
Hmm.
because they both win championships, specifically one in '67. Began supporting themselves in their late teens. They learn Russian to compete against Soviet competitors, spend on expensive clothes at the detriment of their well-being, make a living playing chess, which
Mm-hmm.
was rare for an American at the time, and have aggressive playing styles. But I thought it was interesting because it's kind of a jab at him because he was very, very averse to women playing. He said they were terrible. He said they were not
Oh
smart
no.
in a '63 interview. And so they don't even mention him in the show. Like they mention other people as
Yeah.
if they were in the
Yeah.
time period, but they don't mention him, almost as if she is replacing him in the history
Yes.
of this
Yes.
time, which I thought was pretty
It's
interesting.
very I was gonna talk about it. It's very much a kind of a revisionist history almost look on
Mhm.
at things because there's as we've covered, it's a lot of real things. It's a lot of influence from real people, but the actual plot and the actual character themselves are fictionalized. So
Mhm.
how is it that they took they lied to us to tell us something more true?
Right.
and to say other things. And it's really fascinating, and that kind of work is going on all the time. And this is an interesting one because it really does get to take that feminist twist on it and replace a prominent figure kind
Yeah.
of like him with a woman and say what if, and because everything that happens in the series is totally plausible to a degree. So
Mhm.
it's this nice way to flip the coin and look at history through another lens and
Yeah.
try to judge us against our own context and how comfortable are
Right.
we with what has happened.
Yeah. So I looked
Um,
into, since you bring all that up, women in chess, and saw some interviews with champions and grandmasters that are women, and kind of their take on, because they, of course, everybody that's in
oh
chess has
yeah,
seen this, and what they say about it, and just a little bit of that history and what is being revised
yeah.
for the story. But just in terms of
Yeah, I'd be fascinated to hear what actual women in the sport now think of this.
right, yeah. The
Because
the
okay, it's cool. You can take a prominent male figure, flip it to a woman, and make your own story. But now there are women in the sport. Now, how does that align, or how
Mhm.
does it help them? That's a really interesting
Yeah.
predicament.
So just in terms of influence in general, and then we'll go into women in chess, but eBay said there was a 273% increase in searches for chess sets 10
Oh my
days
gosh.
following when this came out. So that's one search every 6 seconds.
Oh
Somebody
man.
wants to buy a chess set after The Queen's Gambit premiered on Netflix. And then
2020. You need masks. Just invest in masks and chess sets.
yeah. And then chess.com, which is the largest online chess playing platform, since the Queen's Gambit was released, they set a new record for most new members in a single day, every single day of November. It
What?
increased.
Oh my
So
gosh.
this show definitely contributed to the interest
Yeah.
in
I
chess.
mean, and that's only surprising. I'm only having that reaction because I'm just surprised that this has just been so gripping for
Mhm.
people. I mean, we really thought this would be a flash in the pan, and it has some big staying power.
Yeah.
This character seems to really, really connect with people. I mean, they want to see more of her. They are really interested in the character. That's the mark of really getting to empathize for
Yeah.
real with a piece of material. So this is really fascinating that this has really gripped people so much. And people running out to the stores buying chess sets. They're buying them up all over the places. I mean,
Playing online. Yeah.
yeah, playing online, losing money on.
Yeah. So
It's
yeah.
just wildfire. I mean, who would have thought?
Yeah. So women in chess, the title of the thing, the Queen's Gambit.
Right.
The history of the Queen. There was a shift because the Queen was the weakest piece in the board. It was only allowed to move one step diagonally
Mm,
in one direction. Trash piece. Nobody liked it. But in around 1500,
yeah.
specifically in Spain, there's a lot of factors, but it changed and was able to do all these other
Yeah,
all it
no,
could do
yeah.
now. And
As I know her, she's a complete boss. So that's
right,
fascinating.
right.
I didn't realize the game rules had a major shift like
And
that.
when people started playing it that way, and some people theorized that it had to do with Isabella the First's reign in Spain and how much of a boss she
Oh.
was around that time. But chess, if you played it that way, was called the Madwoman's chess game.
Ooh, we ought to bring that back. Start
Well, now
selling
it's just
chess
normal
sets with
chess.
that.
Yeah.
What? I mean the label. I mean
Yeah.
the name. You don't have to change a thing. Just slap that on a box, Fisher Price. I don't know.
Yeah. But in terms of female chess players, the most prosperous one, and I'm definitely butchering the name in terms of how it's pronounced in
Please forgive
Hungarian,
us.
but it's Judith Polgar is considered the best female chess player ever.
Okay.
Also, interestingly, it's not mentioned in the book at all, or if at least I tried to find it, but she has flaming red hair. Judith does,
Oh yeah.
which is definitely a
A little
corollary
bit of
with the series,
yeah.
at least that she would be there. But she beat Kasparov in 2002 when he was ranked number 1.
Really?
So that's her claim to fame. And then she retired in 2014, but she's the only woman to be ranked in the top 10 for the overall championship.
Oh my gosh.
And she said a criticism of the show was that
Mhm.
men were too nice to her. Like she's had situations where men
They're too nice to the character in the
yeah,
show.
in the show. She's
Oh
like,
wow.
men refused to shake my hands. They were
Oh my
violent.
gosh.
There was one guy who hit his head on the board after he lost. Just like,
Whoa. Okay. So, but pause real quick.
yeah.
How bizarre is that?
There is also
Because this would run the risk of saying, "Oh, it's being too political," all that trash. But when you compare it up against the real world experience of the real women, the best in the sport, they say that it doesn't even come close.
Well, and that is her take on it. So there's
sure. I mean that's just one, and that's just one. But I think that
is interesting.
That's a little more than just a drop in a bucket.
Right.
I'm really interested at the thought there. Yeah, that's really fascinating.
So there was another gal, just for some balance, Irina Krush, who won the 8th. She won 8th at the U.S. Women's Championship just this last month. She said men were very supportive when she was up and coming, and she felt included and involved.
Well, that's
and
good, yeah.
Didn't have that. So there's a balance to it. But what cannot be denied is the disparity just in amount and involvement.
You only have one in the top 10. Look at the volume.
Yeah, and current.
I mean, and at that being outranked, I mean, you look at something even like NASCAR. Like there's no like the woman involvement in that sport, the culture. Being the only woman in a major sport like that, the pressure of something like that would be immense, and it would even inadvertently would lead to some sort of pressure to get out.
So currently only one woman ranks in the top 100 in the world, and out of the 1,700 grandmasters that exist, only 37 are women. And so we could talk about like the cause-effect contribution, but the dearth of women at the top of the game is the reason some people would say that there are separate tournaments. So there's a whole other women's world championship, which seems, when I heard this, I was like, it's not like there's an athletic prowess that's different or just a physiology difference.
It's like women and men play different basketball games because their bodies are physically different.
Right. But this is
like they just are physically different and they do different things.
Right.
But the cognitive ability of sitting down to play chess,
right. Well, that's just in terms of the dearth being the reason that they're separate is it's like, well, a lot of people praise it because it's like, well, there wouldn't be opportunity. Now there are more women who can get paid and do this and compete because
it could serve as a huge platform to propel women.
So there's pros and cons to all of it, but I just wanted to get to, and this is an interview I found with, again, sorry about the name, I don't know, I couldn't find it, Jennifer Shahad, who is a 2-time U.S. champion, and she is the U.S. Chess Federation Women's Program Director. Just a little bit about her. I thought this was great. She started just this week, if you're listening to this when it comes out, she's starting a book club for adult women called the Mad Woman's Book Club.
Yes.
And I'll post a link to it. You can sign up for it.
She's bringing it back.
If you're an adult woman who's interested in this, because some of the books that they're going to read are 18 plus in terms of content, but they're going to have a mini chess lesson and a discussion, special guests, but it either will evolve around chess or psychology or women's history, that kind of thing. And the first book they're reading, of course, is The Queen's Gambit. So if you wanted to get on it this week.
This seems like this will be, I mean, it's okay. So chess was a man's world. This seems like this is going to be a huge push for women involvement in the sport. And
her take on it
is incredible.
And how, what she thinks about it. She started at age 6 and then got back into it in high school. And so her thing is, she said a lot of little girls love it. Age 9 is the peak for the U.S. Chess Federation, where she's the women's program director. And she said around age 12 or 13, there's a massive drop off when they get the girls interested in it. And so why? And she said it's really, even though it doesn't seem like it, like we're talking about boring chess, people just standing in front of the board, sitting in front of the board. It's really a very socially involved thing. And so in order to play at a high level, friendships within that network are important. And particularly with girls. Yes. And it's like, if you're a girl and you don't have other girls in your age range, in your city, or in the level of competition that you're playing, it's not going to be interesting. You're going to gravitate to a sport where you have 10 friends.
It's like, have you ever tried to teach somebody your favorite like first person shooter on Xbox who's never played one of those? Like trying to teach somebody who's never done it before, and you want them to be equal with you so you can be challenged and have I could imagine that across the board would be, and so it's just that would group you up. You would start intermingling amongst people who were at that ability level, who were interested at the game at that level, for sure.
So it's potentially a vicious cycle of like, well, why are there no women in there? It's because there are no women in there, and why don't we get them in at an earlier age?
Exactly,
because there's not that many at an early
it might not have anything particular to do with the culture, but that just the state of it and the vicious, like you're saying, the vicious cycle of just the state of it and what that leads to.
Yeah.
Not that anybody is particularly or that anything is particularly toxic, but that the absence doesn't lead to the beginning of it. Like
And at that age, that's when most people start, and then they continue, and then they get to that level. And if you don't start at that level, yeah, it's just fascinating.
That's very interesting. I'm going to ask my fiance too, because she's always been interested in chess. She's been good at chess. She's the only person that I've ever played with. So now I'm wondering when she actually got into it and what the fluctuations there were, because it's never been something big in my world at all, but she's like the only real accessible point I have for it. So
yeah,
I'm going to ask her.
As we round out women in chess, there was a movie that, since this is a fictional account, there is a story. It was a Disney film that came out in 2016 called Queen of Katwe. And it is the true story of Fiona Mutesi, who lived in a slum in Uganda and became the woman candidate master at the World Chess Olympiads.
Oh my god!
And it's her story of that, and it was I think it's based on a book also, but it's a true story of this woman who rises up the ranks in the world of chess.
Oh, fantastic.
So I'll post a link to that as well if you're interested in that. But that came out in 2016. If you wanted something that is more
if you're interested in chess, and then maybe a women's ascension through chess, there's another piece of what sounds like really good material.
Yeah. So now we get to the author, Walter Tevis, his life, and see maybe some of the similarities here where this story comes from with him. And then, you know, like we said, 40 years after, it gets turned into this acclaimed Netflix show.
Yeah, I'm interested because I wasn't aware that he had passed away.
Right. You weren't aware that he passed away. Also, he was a celebrated writer in the 60s and then vanished for 17 years and then came out with this in the 80s and then died. So here's how all of this fits in with his life. Just fascinating. Hopefully we'll see some of the similarities here. But just in terms of chess, before we get into his upbringing, throughout his life, he got to be a Class C competitor, which is the way that he described it. Is he can beat the average person, but he's afraid to play those guys who set up boards in the street on Broadway. Like he's not at that level. Yeah. But he knows enough.
You want to get your ass kicked.
Yeah. So he has some modesty to it. But he was born in San Francisco in 1928. He started playing chess at the age of 7. At age 9, he was diagnosed with this disease called Sydenham's chorea. And if it sounds familiar, it's that twitching spasm thing that H.P. Lovecraft had.
Oh, yes.
And it just, remember how it screwed up his childhood.
Yes.
So Walter Tevis was placed in a convalescent home for a year as a kid.
Oh, my gosh.
And while he was there, his parents left him, abandoned him. So he's essentially an orphan in this hospital.
This isn't like the show at all.
And even more unlike the show, his parents moved to Lexington, Kentucky, which is exactly where Beth Harmon lives.
Oh my God, no way.
This is where they gave him an inordinate amount of medicine as a child every day.
Yeah.
And he developed kind of a dependency to it. Eventually, a family friend paid for his train ticket to Kentucky, and he had the rest of his childhood there with this problem that he developed from just being an orphan abandoned in a hospital with this disease.
So he's taken our homeboy chess figurehead here, and then he's taking a lot of his own journey and creating a new character out of it. And interestingly, making that jump to a woman character out of the two of them, taking two men and comporting it into a new woman character. That's really fascinating. And I would call on people to think about gender roles in narrative and what that means. Look at things like Alien, the Ripley character, how that
motherhood,
exactly. If you're changing a character from male to female, what inherently happens to that character? What are you saying about the thematics that befall that character? Because it definitely throws in a completely different lens on it, and it can really charge something. But if it can also be dangerous if you don't have anything to say. That's the great thing is that usually people who are smart enough to do this know exactly the door that opens,
and that's what resonates. Yeah. So his upbringing, it's interesting that you mentioned changing different things. So chess was not his, you'd think, and now he's in love with chess and plays that all the time as a kid. He did a fair amount, but what he was really interested in was pool, billiards, the green felt. So to not be home, he would hang around this pool room at the hotel that was downtown in Lexington, Kentucky.
Yes, there
and
you
maybe
go.
he would play chess at night and this and that, but he was just fascinated with the pool hall and would be there all the time. So then age 17, World War II comes around. He enlists in the Navy and spent 17 months in Okinawa. And he was on the USS Hamilton as well. But that's where he also learned gambling as a part of that whole lifestyle.
Such as a sailor. I don't
After that, he's so young still, comes back to
that's all I'm thinking. I'm like, well, I mean, that's if you're 20, sure, it's World War II. Gamble.
He comes back to Kentucky, takes a writing course. He gets into college, and he wrote an assignment, which was a story about the pool hall. His writing teacher is the notable A.B. Guthrie, who won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction in 1950. So
NBD.
We also see repeated teachers or mentors that invest in this. Because who would have thought this guy thus far is going to be a right? Like, where does that come in? So this teacher, A.B. Guthrie, is like, this is a great story. He connects him to an agent, and that story got published in Esquire magazine. He got $350 for it.
Cha-ching. I mean, look at that. Boom. Bada boom.
Now he's into it. So he teaches English at the high school in Lexington, still stays there, and is writing short stories, getting them published here and there.
Okay.
After a few years, the agent is like, you need to flesh the thing that I liked you for into a whole big book.
Yeah.
The pool hall story. Where is that?
Yeah.
So he wrote that, and there was going to be a name for it that they didn't like. The agent was like, that doesn't work because it was something about the green. And he's like, people are going to think this is about gardening.
I instantly was like, oh, yeah, people are going to think it's about money.
Yeah. So he's like, you got to change.
People are going to think it's about gardening.
These agents. Yeah. So the book eventually gets titled The Hustler. And that became a very famous.
People are going to think it's about gardening. We want them to know it's about somebody who's willing to do anything. I got it. The Hustler.
Yeah.
Yeah. No misconceptions there.
But the producer of All the King's Men bought it for film. Paul Newman was the actor in it.
No way.
Got 8 Oscar nominations, won 2 Oscar nominations. Book to film success.
You're making stuff up now.
It's real.
This is amazing.
He used the money to get his PhD, and now he's only 31 years old after all of this.
Oh my God.
But of course, we have the ups and downs. He took that money, moved to Mexico with his family. His next book is a sci-fi novel about this alien who ends up in Kentucky, and it's called The Man Who Fell to Earth. Very famous movie as well. David Bowie stars in it.
Oh my gosh.
As the alien. It's one of Philip K. Dick's favorite films.
The more you keep speaking now, the more I'm wondering why this didn't get made when the novel came out.
Yeah.
Because he's already has a track record of
and very
material,
diverse material.
Into, good, diverse material getting adapted into successful film and television pieces. Mm-hmm. There's 2 in the bank, and I felt like you were just getting started with that. I'm like, how did that not? How did he not get across the line?
Here's kind of his decline and all this stuff. Remember, we talked about the drugs and whatnot. So his drinking begins in Mexico. He has addictive tendencies. Yeah. The world's awaiting his next book, but like I said, we wouldn't get it for nearly 20 years.
Oh my gosh!
He goes back to Ohio to teach English. He teaches at a university there, but he said he would drink at night, play pool and chess at night. He would drink from midnight to 4 a.m. and go teach, and it was just this vicious cycle. He tried to hide his drunkenness. His family and marriage is not doing well. This goes on for years. Another merging of positive influences. Dan Keyes, the author of Flowers for Algernon, lived there and was his friend, and they would play pool together. But his life is he's not getting there where he was before because of these addictions. He went to go on a writing thing because now he's still trying to do a little bit of the short story, article stuff. He was tasked with going to Las Vegas in 1974 to cover the National Open, this chess tournament in Las Vegas. And he was sort of re-inspired by it. He was like, oh my God, I had never seen the competitiveness, the intensity like that. He remembered it. Like, how do we put this in? But that was a nonfiction piece. But that's, I think, the recatalyst. But it would be several years after that. But eventually he sobers up. He's now divorced and decides to move to New York City to get his writing career back on again. So 2 years after he moves to New York, he writes a sci-fi novel called Mockingbird, which is an allegory for alcoholism,
Mm,
drugs, dependency,
yeah,
pleasure, all of that stuff is bad, and
yeah,
family and people and friendships is good. But
yeah.
it's set in the future, and it's this just
He's
dystopia
really
and all that
working
stuff.
it. He's like really working out his stuff.
It is about
Pretty,
self-discovery, yeah. And then
yeah.
the year after that book comes out, he writes The Queen's Gambit.
And that's all. And that seems now, if you're taking it back to him working through his own problems, that seems to be kind of giving a lens back to his childhood and his
Mhm.
upbringing, and try to, not excuses, but to justify and track what happened and how did one A lead to B, lead to C, lead to, oh my God,
Mhm.
it seems like almost a therapeutic retracing of what happened to me
Mhm. And now he's
after
back
they're
on
on
the
that
yeah, he's
place.
back on the track. So after that, he wrote the sequel to The Hustler, came out the next year.
Oh wow.
The eventual film Color of Money by Martin Scorsese. Paul Newman won his first Oscar for
Oh,
that film.
wow. So, again, The Color of Money. How?
Mhm.
How? How? How is
Yeah.
he again, I knew it, and I knew it was gonna get even more pressed,
Mhm.
but, again, I'm left at,
Yeah.
how did he not get this made
It's just so
at the
crazy. Yeah,
time?
because he ended up not ever seeing that movie because 8 days after the book was published, he died of lung cancer, and he was
Oh,
56.
oh my
So
gosh.
then here now we have 40 years later, he comes back up again with his second to last book being the thing that now, his
Now
all
it's
his
nothing
stuff
but
is.
a certified hit. I mean, it
Mhm.
is
And so
absolutely.
I think it's just interesting as we round this out, like people, like we said at the beginning, people are looking up, is this based on a true story? And it's like
Right.
it kind of is.
It's no, but yes, and this is something I think about all the time when writing anything. What can you draw from that really says that gets you going, that really gets to your heart, if whether it be from your childhood or maybe your sport hero, his
Mhm.
childhood, and what were the things that they faced? What were the things that you faced? Well, are you so different? If you comport that into a new person,
Yeah.
what else do you want to say about those things that you faced, that they faced? You can take so much about your real life, and the things that really bother you, and comport them into brand new things.
And I think the
Um,
blessing of all of it too is, as we see now and even before, like the reality then bends towards the fiction the other way. So in terms of the pool stuff, with the pool room in The Hustler
mhm.
was the only one he'd been to in his life. But now most pool rooms look like the way he described it and the way that the movie presented. And even the character, he invented the character Minnesota Fats. And there was a guy who was a famous pool player who called himself Minnesota Fats after
Oh my
seeing The
god.
Hustler and convinced people that the character was based on him.
Oh
But
my
Walter Tevis
gosh.
denied it. And I think it's the same way with this. It's like now a lot
Yes.
of people are getting interested in chess
Yes. Yes.
because of him
Yeah,
talking
we're
about
getting to
chess.
the where she's gonna be real. Beth
Right.
Harmon will be, she will be made true.
Yeah.
It's don't get too siloed and thinking that you don't exist in this world, and you can't touch it, because
Mhm.
whatever you put out there, sometimes, man, it gets mirrored back to you 40 times more intense than you ever
Or
expected.
40
I mean,
years
this is insane.
later. Yeah.
40, exactly, down the road, maybe beyond your life. You have no idea. That's
Yeah.
wild. That's
I just thought it was such
absolutely
a cool
incredible.
story, especially considering it's like here's this weird Netflix miniseries that has come about, and there is so much to how it all fits together.
So I hope that's inspiring for anybody trying to be creative, do some writing out there. Is that, this is it true? Not exactly, but it came from somewhere.
Yeah.
Thank you, Taylor. This was great. Fantastic. Check us out on Instagram at AlliteratePod on Instagram. Please let us know what you are watching, what you're reading, what you're interested in. You never know when we'll do an episode on it. And we will talk to you next week.
Thanks.